All right, we are reviewing DC Comics Blue Beetle. It is definitely a little bit delayed. It came out in theaters a while ago, didn't do great in theaters. I don't even know if that was really why I waited. It just wasn't really, didn't want to go waste my time and my money in the theaters for something like this. So I waited and I saw it, ended up seeing it on HBO Max. And I'm glad I waited, but I'm also really glad that I ended up seeing it. Okay, so initial ideas, initial thoughts. I love this actor. The actor who plays Blue Beetle is great. First time I saw him was on Cobra Kai, which is not too great of a show, but he stood out, I think, and he stood out in this as well. He's just so upbeat and youthful. He has great charisma. You just want to be his friend and you want to root for him. Some, again, youthful teen superhero like Blue Beetle here. Amazing fitting cast. Another one was the representation of this movie. You know, it's definitely more focused on the Latino population. That's what Jaime Reyes is, the main character's family. That's who they are, and a lot of it is based on them, their family specifically. And I wasn't a huge fan of, am still not a huge fan of Jaime Reyes as a character. It's never because of anything, because of his representation or anything like that. It was more just I liked the original Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, a little bit more, and we'll talk about that. But I do got to appreciate, understand, and respect the impact that a Latino superhero must have had on a lot of people. He's a relatively new character. He's been around for a few decades now, but there's not too many of them out there, and he really carries the banner extremely well. I think I've seen good things in other ones, but in this movie specifically, there's a lot of heart and family and culture behind it that I can certainly see and appreciate. I'm sure this was great for a lot of grown-ups and kids alike back when he was first introduced, and again, he's still holding the fort down strong in that capacity. And the last of the initial thoughts in this category is just how huge and in your face the economic side of this movie is. Huge poor versus rich vibes. It's super important in our world. It's a lot of people can't really forget about it, can't put it to the side. So it makes sense, certainly in some ways. But also I found this weird kind of avenue again with the initial thoughts where the movie, the Reyes family is poor and the Kord family is rich. And really seems almost like the only way for a poor family or poor person to elevate themselves and become important or whatever is to just kind of happen to bump into these rich people and be chosen by them. That felt a little, I don't know about icky, but a little wrong, uncomfortable. It wasn't all focused on that. And other movies have done it far more egregiously. But it put me a little on edge, I would say. Then we can get into the plot, yada yada, skip a few things. Jaime Reyes gets his Blue Beetle suit right after we establish everything and get a few plot points, important points out of the way. So when he first transforms, it happens in no other transformation in this movie, and there's quite a few. And maybe it's just how close and slow the first one is, but it is terrifying and creepy. It's like taking over his whole body and just like seeping out of weird ways and like clenching onto weird things. It's like a mini horror movie in the middle of this really upbeat, fun superhero flick. And I don't really understand that choice. That was kind of odd. I guess they were just really like getting into the moment. I don't know. The second point is, Blue Beetle's suit is it's like this, right? But it was just way too on the nose. The only thing I could think about when they finally got the Blue Beetle suit was they just did it like Iron Man, right? There's only so much you can do to get away from this, full metal suit that allows you to fly and everything. But they just did way too much, completely on the nose, completely in rap with Iron Man. I'm gonna go through a few ideas, right? I mean, the view screen that he's showing, very similar to the ones we've seen in Iron Man. The Jarvis voice, the AI. I mean, there is one in Blue Beetle, okay, but it's just on the nose. The flying, just the mechanics of it. The nanotech suit, so it's just coming onto his body. We've seen that plenty of times with RDJ. The eyes, so it looks like his eyes are very stapled onto his head, but you see the like the sunlight coming through on his eyes that we've seen so much, mostly in the earlier Iron Man movies. That was weird. That was like way too much of an homage. It was just copying it, I thought. The repulsor blast. He had a bunch of other different weapons, but the repulsor blast kind of thing that they did, at least at the beginning, looked way too similar to Iron Man. And then the hologram shields, we've seen that in the later versions and more like Infinity War, Endgame. So there was just too much. How else are you going to do it, I guess? So who am I to say? But you could have gotten away from it a little bit more. It just looked exactly like Iron Man. It felt more of a copy, a ripoff than an homage, or just kind of taking the good from something that has already been done well. I did appreciate how using the suit was extremely intuitive. You need to, this is a brand new thing, so it needs to have a little bit of a learning curve, but we don't want to focus down, we don't want to get bogged down on that too much. Once we figure it out, we want to keep the plot moving along. George Lopez is just having a freaking blast out here with his van and his toys and everything. He just great, jumping on the wave. His energy, his vibe is immaculate. And then last little piece, I just wanted to talk about it. It gets better as we see, but the first prototype of the OMAC just looked particularly weird. I don't know if it was supposed to look particularly weird, or if they just didn't spend a lot of money on this. This was the one that they didn't, because it looked like kind of stop motion claymation stuff, akin to RoboCop of the 80s. I don't know if you remember that walker thing. It looked exactly like that. Every time he moved, it was just odd, and it was like frames more than actually CGIing anything onto him or having anything practically on. I know it was supposed to look not finished because it was a prototype, but there was something just way too janky about it. I wonder if that was purposeful or not. Then we are kind of learning about the past Blue Beetle in Ted Cord. We go down to the Blue Beetle cave. I don't even think they give it a name, whatever it is. But they go down to that house and they're just kind of like learning new information, learning that Ted Cord was the past Blue Beetle. Any DC fan would have known that, but appreciate it. Gotta love it that they throw it in here. Blue Beetle is one of my favorite kind of like lesser known, lesser tiered DC superheroes. He's very similar to Batman in many ways, as you can see from the cave and his vehicles that we'll talk about. And his suit in general, just not having powers, gadgets, detective, everything like that. But there's just something about him. His design is great. He's definitely from a different age. He is dead in this, but then we find out that he's not dead. Spoilers alert. At the very, very end, it's like the post-credit scene. So if they ever make a sequel, which they almost certainly will not, because of how James Gunn really reshaped everything, we might be able to see Ted Cord again. That would be fun. I would appreciate that. I don't even know who the actor was. I couldn't really see. It wasn't showing the face, which I was surprised they didn't just go for that. But maybe that shows that they didn't have anyone cast it or whatever. But they did have a voice. I don't know. And then you also got a double respect that they threw Jason Garrett's name out there as well. He was the original Blue Beetle from a long time ago in the Charlton comics. The Ted Cord was as well, but like a really, really long time ago in the 40s or 50s or whatever it was. They've all kind of put that in that chronology now. With Jason Garrett figured out the scarab, he was able to use it, but didn't have the nanotech suit for some reason. That's just because they didn't think of that back then. And then Blue Beetle, who couldn't figure it out but was testing it and just used gadgets instead. And then Jaime Reyes, who can figure it out again. but just gotta respect the nerdom there and taking the source material seriously. Then from there, the Reyes house gets attacked, so Blue Beetle has to zip over there and defend his family, and it doesn't go great. The house gets destroyed and blown up and everything, which is sad. But I couldn't help but thinking, it's not the worst time for that to happen. I mean, from the first time he put on the suit, he was flying in and out of the house and causing giant holes and everything. It was already pretty much trash, to be honest. And also, they were supposedly losing it because they couldn't pay rent or whatever, so they were gonna move out anyway. So again, never good to have your house go up in flames, but as moments and times and situations go for that happening, not the worst. And then the second aspect of this is just, I know it's a little bit, it's a superhero, obviously, so that's some of it, but it's also this, I don't know, more like hyper technology, corporate view of the world or whatever, but corporations can't just send armed military guys everywhere and do things, at least in broad daylight. I mean, it was so obvious and open. There was people living everywhere. I mean, where the hell were any cops? Anyone, even like a nice cop who, like a disillusioned rookie or whatever that wasn't bought into the corruption yet and needed to go at least tell them to be quiet or question something. That I think was a little too much for me in that point. But it didn't ruin anything, but definitely kept thinking. I was just, these are like, this is a militia. This is an armed military of like a random country. You can't just flood them into the streets and have this helicopter touchdown in this normal suburbia. Moving right along, Jaime gets captured, and the whole rest of the Reyes family and Jenny Cord, the good-intentioned daughter, have to go to the Dr. No kind of island and save Jaime. This is the big climax for the most part. How they get there is the bug, Blue Beetle's bug, his ship, which is freaking awesome as well. If it looks familiar, you are correct. It is the inspiration for the, I don't know what they call it, maybe the owl or something. No, it has a name. I don't even remember the name. But from Watchmen, the movie or the comic book, whatever you want to call it. And actually, everything from Watchmen was inspired by Charlton Comics characters, right? DC had recently established the license when Alan Moore started writing it. Dave Gibbons was the author, and he asked them to use these characters because he wanted to use them for what would become Watchmen, but they didn't want to let him destroy them because, as you see in Watchmen, he did destroy a lot of them and made them look like not great people or whatever. So he just created very on-the-nose analogs, which I love. Alan Moore's just like, go to hell attitude. I'm gonna do what I want. But if you can see there, Night Owl is Blue Beetle. Dr. Manhattan is Captain Atom. Peacemaker, believe it or not, is, he wasn't a big name, he is now, is the comedian. There's a few other ones. Who are the other ones? Rorschach is the Question, and I don't, to be honest, I don't even remember either of the girls' names, but there's Nightshade, I think, is the one from Charlton Comics, and whatever her name is from Watchmen, that's the same one, and that's the analog. So just took really easy rip-offs and made his own character, his own story anyway. Good on him, and it made Watchmen. So what are you gonna say? There's nothing to say. Go Alan Moore, he rocks. But in this, Nana is a revolutionary. She's talking about fighting against the imperialists. Gotta love it. That's awesome. Little story beat there, and the actress that plays the grandmother really takes it in stride as well. It feels like a bad idea. At least I thought it was a bad idea to storm this island with all these crazy high-tech military guys, but the bug just did most of the work, and they were getting in there, and there's some cool action here and there. They try to blow, they blow something up, the sister and Jenny, they blow up a lot of it. You had no idea what was going to happen to Jaime. That I thought was crazy. I mean, if you're going in here to try to save him, I would not just start blowing up random computers and random boxes and things that could totally kill him. He could be on the other side of that wall for all you know. They didn't find his location yet. So that was a bad idea, but luckily it worked out for them. The final, sinking of Jaime with the Beetle, with the Scarab, was really good. To kind of his whole ethereal plane, talking with his dead father and reconciling with it, and just the metaphysical and kind of in your head ideas of everything, and then just the literal touching, all really, really solid. And then we do get some pretty solid action. I do love a lot of it, especially with his big, now complete Omax suit. But then in the end, he just melts the villain's icy heart. It's kind of almost like laughable in some ways. I felt it didn't feel right to me, but whatever, you want to do that feel good movie. This is more of a teenage superhero, so it would not be as good as if you just murdered this guy, I suppose. But then the freaking villain just grabs the evil cord woman by the neck and just drags her into the fire, kicking and screaming, and it just blows up. I mean, hardcore, but again, also laughable. That last little bit probably could have used a little bit of retooling there. Last little bit, wrapping the actual plot up. The Reyes family is all worried about not having a house, and they don't say no to the entire neighborhood coming to start helping them out with stuff and giving them food. But they just made friends with a super rich woman and went through like this crazy experience with her. It seems like her son is basically dating her, and the one who was ruling the company is gone now, so she's obviously the one company. I mean, you don't want to be greedy, you got to be humble and everything, but you knew Jenny was going to help them out with something, and she has so much money in some capacity. She was going to help them out. I think at the very least she was going to get them a new house. Again, that felt weird, needed a little bit more retooling. And the romance wasn't amazing. I didn't totally feel it throughout the whole thing, but this last little interaction was brutal, right? I don't really act out a lot of things here, but just I have to for this one, right? Because they're talking and it kind of looks like they might kiss or ask her out on a date or something, and then Jenny just looks at her watch and says, "Oh, I gotta go." And he's like, "Oh, let me walk you to your bike," talking a little bit, I think. And then he asks, "Where are you going?" And she says, "Oh, I'm going to look at pictures at my house." Like, what? You were just leaving me and you were just saying that you had somewhere to be? Because you looked at the time. That meant that you had a time to be there. Like, there was a time that you're looking at to do something. That's not a time-sensitive activity. You can do that whenever you want. It's your house. I was just, that was brutal. That was really awkward. Didn't like that. And then they kissed and shot off or whatever. Romance could have used a little bit of work. Last few little ideas, overall ideas, more aesthetic, to be honest. First one to do with the action. So it was actually surprisingly good. When you're having a character that's so intertwined with technology, so advanced, you can really sacrifice action, I think. Happens with Iron Man sometimes, just because you can shoot everything or whatever. But Jaime and the other characters use a lot of creative weapons, from swords to bigger swords to even bigger swords. Just kidding, but also not. There's the staples and the sonic weapons and like axes, shields, so many different things. So that's good. It does kind of get a little iffy because you're thinking about just how infinite this is. If they're just using this every single time, what can't they use? At some point you got to draw a line, and they don't really draw too many lines. So there could be a danger there. I don't know if that danger really presented itself, but I'm sure it had some people thinking, what can't this freaking suit do, right? And the last point just being that overall the suits looked good, but it didn't look good when you revealed the faces. That is a common problem with a lot of things, specifically, again, Iron Man. I'm relating it to it so much because the suits are just so closely intertwined with Iron Man. They just look so similar. But when Jaime's like mask was half cut, that looked awful. That completely, I think, took you out of what was going on. They should have looked at that and just noticed that was not gonna fly. And then when the bad guy's helmet came off and he was sitting there, that didn't look great either. It is what it is in a lot of ways. You know, these are pretty unnatural suits that you're not going to see, and even if we do one day make them, they're not going to look perfect. So nothing really against it. But you know, last overall thoughts here, even though I just did it, doing it again, and even more overall from an even higher 2-mile view instead of just a mile view. It was good. I'm glad I watched it. It was a lot of fun. Again, the representation was great. The acting was pretty solid for the most part. I loved how they stayed faithful to the comics. I loved how they were light and breezy with a lot of it as well. And at the same time, I'm glad I waited and didn't hype this up and go in the movie theater, but I'm also sad. I'm also happy that I didn't just decide to skip it on HBO. It's unfortunate this probably doesn't mean anything, this along with Aquaman 2, because DC is basically totally rebooting under James Gunn. But it's a good thing, I think, that this squeaked out before everything really went belly up and all crazy. I still want to see a Ted Kord movie. So Jaime Reyes had his spotlight. James Gunn, let's switch gears and get a Ted Kord movie in.